Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Fanatics live Q&A ahead of round 10. It is Tuesday night, the 14th of May, and we've got a fair bit to discuss with a little bit of news coming out today, as always on the Tuesdays with the injury reports and everything. But I am your host, Bails, and you can find me at Bails DT across all of the socials. You will not see, well, if you're listening back, my fellow Fantasy Fanatic, Tim, is not quite here yet. He will hopefully be joining us a little bit later on. Just got a couple of things to do, but we will press forward. And we've got a couple of special guests to jump on with us. So returning after he did a great job last week with us, with Jordox from the coaches panel. Mate, how you going? How was your round 9?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. I've had a good couple of weeks, but absolutely thoroughly enjoyed myself last week. So great to be on again. And as you said, another week passes and there is still so much to discuss. So looking forward to it.
Yep, yeah, exactly, mate. And we do have another special guest. First time since we had the, I think, pre-round 1 Q&A. It is a man that you will know as the Fantasy Nut on the socials. Very, very good coach. Vams, mate, how are you? How was your round 9?
Yeah. Poor per usual, to be honest with you, mate. I've had an absolute mare to not just start the season, but the entire season. And I had, obviously, Rosie, as many people did, had Sweet, as many people did, but I chose to go a slightly different route, probably the wrong route in hindsight. But I was like, look, the only way I might be able to catch up a little bit later is to try and maybe upgrade around those guys rather than sidewaysing them. So I held Rosie and I took a sweet donut. So I had, as you would expect, a low score. But again, with the hope that maybe both of them can return this week. And again, if I can upgrade around them, maybe my team in a few rounds' time might be looking a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully Rosie can return this week. He's listed as a test for those people that wanted to know with him. But boys, we'll get stuck straight into a couple of the issues, and I think that we will start with probably the biggest sort of issue that people, well, not issue, but people, so the player that people are looking at in Harry Sheezel, and we'll bring Colby McKercher into this. So Colby McKercher today, it's come out that he will not be playing this week. He's got bone stress on his foot, so he'll be missing this week, and there's a chance that he does miss more than the 1 week. I wouldn't be shocked if he missed next week, so they got the bye the following week. And we know bone stress in the foot especially can be a little bit tricky at times, depends on their progress. And he was talking on Fox Footy earlier tonight and was saying that, he's hopeful to be back next week, but we'll just have to see how it all pulls up next week. So, Vams, I'll start with you, mate. I was on Sunday night, I was pretty keen to trade Sheezel, sort of with the high break even, tough matchups to come and everything like that. And with obviously McKercher being out, what do you think this does? Do you think it's as easy as just saying Sheezel goes back into defence and everything's sort of all well and good? Or do you think that, do they keep Sheezel forward knowing that they're wanting to develop him into this mid-forward and they're going to maybe put a Bailey Scott with more responsibility back there? Maybe Hardeman gets a bump, maybe someone else comes in. What do you think goes on with that North Melbourne backline, or what do you think will happen?
Oh, look, it's honestly a tough one because I could make a very sound argument either way, honestly. Gun to my head, I reckon they stick with him up the ground, I think. I don't feel strongly with that, but I don't know, like early, you'll recall in the preseason, they said all along that the plan at some point this season was for Sheezel to move into the midfield as a sort of a mid-forward type player. They sort of signalled early on, look, they'll start the season with him in defence, again, with a view to moving him up the ground at some point. I guess the issue with trading him is that if he goes back to defence, you know he's going to be putting up 120s for fun. And not having him when he's doing that is very painful, as I can attest to. But what is he priced at now? He's priced very, very highly. And the thing is, he's not playing this like pure, sort of inside mid role. Like you'd think that like he would have got, 60, 70% CBAs on the weekend, but far from it. He got 29% of CBAs on the weekend, spent quite a lot of time forward. And playing for that North Melbourne team, if he's going to be playing forward quite a bit, I do wonder, is he even going to be able to average much more than, let's say, 90? Even that might be ambitious depending on how much midfield time he gets. So I do think trading him is an option if you don't have any other avenues to raising cash. And I think that's a big caveat. If you don't believe in, the Collingwood rookie Richards, if you don't think he's going to be sticking around, or you don't feel confident in any other sort of rookies that are being named that they're going to, maybe even stick around just for the buys to help you out, or make decent amount of cash. I do think trading out Sheezel to raise money, like bring him down to someone else that can maybe score at least as well as in, hopefully even better than him. But if that money raise can also allow you to get a Roberts up, for instance, in that circumstance, I think it's justifiable. But again, honestly, it's a tough one. It's easy for me to sort of make that suggestion without any skin in the game. I don't know what I would do if I actually did have Sheezel. And again, I could make an argument that they would say, look, maybe they want to put him back there because will they really want to rely on Fisher alone, bring the ball out of defence? I don't know. But on the other hand, maybe their long-term plan is to develop Sheezel into sort of this mid-forward role, and maybe they're just going to stick with that. I wish I could give you a more definitive answer than that, but the truth is I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is a tough one. Liam from Free Kick actually is in the chat here and saying Harry Sheezel actually had the second highest play rating of his career in his game agained Gold Coast. That is very interesting as well. When it was
a point.
Lower score,
glad,
so George, you go now.
I have a bit of a different view, and the McKercher injury, which I'm sure we'll go into greater detail, but he's at the very least going to miss this week. That was really frustrating for me because, well, I've still got McKercher and I'm enjoying what he's doing, but I could see a lot of people trading Sheezel out, and my instinct was that's a mistake. And the reason for that is, he's 2 weeks, I think, in this sort of more midfield role. Did he play this role last week against the Saints? Do we know? Or was it just this week?
No, so it was against the Saints. He went into the forward line actually in the sort of more the second half against the Crows down in Tassie, particularly the last quarter. And then it was the game against the Saints that he essentially played a lot of forward, and then obviously continued into this game. So it's essentially been the better part of 2.5 games.
Yeah, so let's look at the 2.5 games then. The Crows game, he must have done it with scoring before that happened. That was a typical Sheezel score. But last week against the Saints, who have been a somewhat tricky side at times to play against fantasy. If you can recall, Nick Dacos had a very unexpected 60 earlier in the year against the Saints. Someone else recently had a poor one. It escapes me. He scored an 89.
Tom Green?
Yeah, could have been. Yeah. It's the Saints just, I don't know. There's been a couple of times. Anyhow, so Sheezel scored 89 last week against the Saints. And then he's come up to Darwin. And I know the role has changed significantly, but haven't we been talking about these Darwin games as danger games? If you own Gold Coast players, it's going to be the same for the opposition. And he scored a 71. It's a crap score, and we're all panicking because the role changed. But I don't know. The role changes, it can change again. North Melbourne are just, I said it last week, they're just trying different things. And I think, yes, it's good for Sheezel to move up the ground, and they want to develop him into a midfielder and maybe with a bit of a forward sort of flavour to it. But he's just one player. North have just got to focus on not losing the game by quarter time. Like Sheezel's moved, I could easily see him move back next week and then move again. So I guess if you're in Vam's position where you've not had Sheezel this whole time, this is plucks of fortune for you. You're not going to jump on him now. And if you do, you're going to do it when he's dropped significant price. But for those that have him, I wouldn't be trading him out. But he just sits there, and we'll wait and see. They've got the Bombers, then they've got Port, and then the bye. So it's a difficult couple of weeks. But let's see what they do with him. I wouldn't be in a rush to trade him out. And now with the McKercher news, I certainly won't be.
Yeah,
I think that's a fair point. I think waiting, maybe I think trading him knowing that McKercher's out this week, I think that's tough because again, if they do put him back there and he goes 125 again, you're not going to feel great. My counter as well would be that he's got a couple of relatively tough matchups in. The Bombers have been like we're used to now for many years, Bombers actually being a relatively juicy matchup. This year they've become quite tight to play against, and that's not a great matchup. And then he's got Port Adelaide, which, as we all know, is not a great matchup. And then he's got his bye. So another sort of weighting in terms of trading him out, if you were leaning that way already, would be one, if you were concerned about those matchups, and two, with that round 12 bye, if you're already overloaded with round 12 bye, guys, you want a little bit of leeway with that round 12, sort of how many guys you've got on a bye that round. Maybe you want to bring in a Tom Green for the next couple of weeks. He's got a couple of nice matchups. He's another round 12 guy as well. That's a couple of other sort of factors that might make you lean more towards trading him. But
yeah, of course.
Again, gun to my head, I'd probably agree with Jordox and say, if I had him, I probably wouldn't have the stones to get rid of him this week.
Yeah. I'm just having a look as well. So Sheezel actually scored in the Crows game when he went forward at 22 and 25 points. So he hasn't had too many quarters where he scored over that sort of 25 to 30 point range. I'm leaning towards still trading just because even if he goes to half back, Matt Guelphy will be waiting for him this week. And look what he did to Whitfield this week. Obviously kept him pretty quiet. And then he's going into Port Adelaide, which Jed McEntee played on Tom Stewart. So we could see a couple of those tough matchups. I went on Selby's price projector. And if he was to go back-to-back tons to score bang on 100, he still goes down to anywhere below 920K. So there's still going to be a decent amount of cash loss. But with McKercher out, it has sort of made me think a bit more about that. I think the only way you're really trading Sheezel anyway is if you're going him down and someone up on the other end. I think if you can't do that, then this is just even more of a case of you're not trading Sheezel. But yeah, it could be one of those moves that we could see people sort of, if you jump off and he stays forward and drops a lot of cash, then it could sort of set you on your way. But if you trade him out and then he goes back to halfback and scores 120s, then you could sort of be on a bit of a lonely island. But we'll just quickly touch on McKercher as well, Jordox. Obviously, he's out this week. We don't know how long. Is that just a trade? Regardless of how good he's been, is it just a trade for you because we don't really know how long he's out for? Or if you can if you've got a closey on your bench and he was on your your bench last week, could you play him and hold him? What are you thinking with that?
Oh yeah, we're blessed with bench guys and looping, and the caliber of the cash cows this year has just been fantastic. So,
and he plays on Sunday.
And he plays on Sunday. Yeah, well, that's extra helpful too. So, yeah, I think you can hold him. I want to hold him. I'm optimistic it could be 1 week, but geez, I think the more I think about it, and you look at that fixture, the bye coming up, it does feel like maybe they'll give the kid a few weeks. It's his first year, don't forget. So, but the good news is he's worth a bit, and there's plenty you can do with the trade. So it's not terrible. Every year there's a cash cow that we trade out when we think they've sort of plateaued a bit or they, are arrested or whatever. And there's always one that always comes back and kills you on the back end. I remember Sam Walsh did it in his first year, traded him out. And in the back end of the year, he was just one of the primos. So I'm just nervous, but it's AF. We do have plenty of trading trades. You don't have to be too conservative like the other formats. You can always trade him back in if it looks that way, but for some, they've already done that, so I doubt it.
Yeah. We'll move on to a couple of other players, and if we get other questions about involving Sheezel, and that we'll maybe touch on it again with that later. But Vams, 2 players that are quite popular this week that people are looking at. Clayton Oliver being the most popular out of them, and Tom Green getting a little bit of chatter as well, being how cheap he is, and people may be looking at jumping on him. What are your thoughts on both these guys, and are you keen on either or both?
Yeah, I mean, I would be keen on both. I brought in Oliver last week. Again, my team is not sitting in a great sort of way with regards to team value and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of forced to have to look at some of these cheaper premiums. Obviously, we know why Oliver is cheap. He has not had a great start to the season. He also was injured for a couple of those games, a couple of tough matchups as well. Tom Green, we know the reason he's gotten so cheap. started off on absolutely on fire, and then had a couple of quiet games, and then obviously that injury affected game a couple of weeks ago. His break even off the top of my head is about that. What is it? 130, 140 in that. Yeah, 133. So look, even if he goes at 110ish this week, he's only going to drop another 10, 15K. So, I mean, you can look at it in two different ways with regards to Tom Green, whether to bring him in this week or next week. One, you can say, look, his price is not going to get away from me, and I've got other priorities this week. I'd rather get Oliver he's got a lower break even. He's cheaper to get to this week. I'd rather bring him in this week and then look at Tom Green either next week or maybe even after his early round 12 bye. Someone like a Jeremy Sharp to Tom Green is going to be not a hard trade to make. On the other hand, you can say, hey, it's not that often we get an opportunity to get a Tom Green type who, in reality, he's going to go at that 110 clip for the rest of the season, just about, maybe even a fraction more than that. It's not often we get an opportunity to jump on him at such a cheap price. He's got a couple of reasonably nice matchups before his bye. I think what's he got? Western Bulldogs this week, and then Geelong the week after. Certainly that Geelong matchup has been very, very juicy for inside mids this year. So, and then soon after the bye, I think he's got a couple of nice games. I think he's got, let's have a look here. After the bye, he's got, I'm not seeing it, but I think he's got a couple of nice matchups after his bye as well. So the problem with waiting for someone like that is next thing you know, you've got a couple of other bullets or a couple of other problems, or there's a couple of really important rooks that you need to get on, and you kind of miss the opportunity, or you're having to, you're forced to kind of miss someone else as well. So I'm generally of the view of when you've got an opportunity to jump on, it can sometimes be not a bad idea just to go that week early, even though maybe you can get them the next week for 10, 20K less. I did that with Oliver last week, and I was planning on maybe doing that with Tom Green this week. So in answer to your question, yes, I would be absolutely interested in both. It's just a matter of working out what to do with this McKercher news, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So he's got Hawthorn, followed by Port Adelaide, and then into Sydney and Adelaide after the bye. The only thing I'd probably say with the Hawthorn matchup looks good. I'll probably still bring him in around 13, but last year we did actually see Connor Nash, I think, tag him after halftime in that game and kept him relatively quiet, and they sort of match up well. So that could be something that they look at doing. But we'll have to see what happens with that.
Question though. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I wish I didn't have Tom Green so I could get him at this price. Yeah. But he's played in his last 6 games. 1, he scored 7. Obviously, we know what happened there. And then the only other score over 100 was a 127, which was very nice against the Lions. He's gone an 88, 72, a flat 100, the 127, the injured game, the 98. Don't know. Is that really the scores of a must-have guy?
I mean, I think, like you said, I would agree with what you said earlier. St Kilda has not been a fantastic matchup for inside mids this year. And so if we accept that one was a toughish matchup, in reality, it's okay, let's remove those first few weeks. He's then gone 88 against Gold Coast, a toughish matchup. Yes, absolutely a down game. Then 100, 127, and then even Essendon, not a fantastic matchup, but he still had 34 touches. The fantasy score wasn't there, but that was actually
time on ground.
Was that the reason, is it? Okay. So
I think he had 72% or something.
Yeah, so there must have been some sort of stuff up with the rotations or something like that. But it's not as if he didn't play really well in that game. So, I mean, we obviously do see some of these Uber premiums have a quiet couple of games, and I think that's generally the opportunity. Generally, when you've got the opportunity to jump on before, there's every chance, if not this week, next week, he comes out and does a 145, and then everyone will be scrambling to sort of get on him. Ideally, we get on him before he kind of bounces back with that big ceiling score. And, to Jordox's point, he has had a couple of quiet games, and I feel like he's kind of due. And you've got Josh Kelly now with this injury news, with him being out. You feel like some of that usage, or as Rowan from Twitter, has coined this concept of market share, which again I just kind of reframe as usage. So I feel like, similar to Nick Dacos, you had a couple of key pies mids coming out, and what happens, it's not really a coincidence in my view that Dacos comes out and has his best game. It's just that little bit of extra, they have to shoulder that a little bit of extra load. They're going to get that extra ball. There's not that another midfield gun sitting right there. That is another option for them. It's either you're going to give it to Tom Green or Peatling. I mean, one guy's going to demand the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, and
the Giants have been down the last few weeks as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and if we look at in past years as well, we don't see too many of these mids go on these big runs early in the year when the game's a bit more open, better conditions. But we've seen in past years when it gets obviously a bit more wet, a bit more contested, teams are sort of grinding out games. You see these players go on big runs. That we saw Jack Seal and Toot Miller in 2021 do that. We saw Roy Led in 2022 do that. Last year, we saw Bont do that in the back half of last year. So we see these guys go on these stretches. And Tom Green could be that guy that goes on a stretch, averaging 115, 120.
And certainly, don't get me wrong, I have him as a top 8 mid from here. It's just more in the question of maybe him or an Oliver this week.
Yep.
If towards Tom Green's break even, I imagine it's still
133.
It's still fairly high. So
Oliver's is in the 70s.
Yeah. There's a lot of value there. I mean, even Rosie, for a few, at the minute, he'd be an extra 30, 40K, sitting and waiting a couple of weeks to see if he gets back. He could be a guy that, roars home in the second half of the year as well.
I think a lot of coaches that don't have both have probably got round 13, Tom Green, round 14, Connor Rosie. I think a lot of coaches are going to be looking at doing that. Final thing we'll touch on quickly before we look at these questions people put in is the rookie options this week. So we got a Joe Richards who played very, very well on the weekend and could even keep his spot potentially longer term, even when a couple of those guys come back. Obviously, Lockie Sullivan, Bruce Revel. I think even potentially he hasn't been set in the 1-5, but maybe Riley Hardiman becomes a bit interesting now with McKercher out as well. So we got a few options there. I've probably forgotten one or two off the top of my head that I can't quite think of. But Vams, who is the guy you're probably looking at the most out of those guys? Because with buys coming up, I think job security is probably going to be something that we got to be looking at as well. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think again, unfortunately, we don't have the prognosis for the McKercher injury, but I would think that bodes well for Hardiman to potentially stay in the side. But the guy, if I do sort of a rookie downgrade this week, I think it's going to be Richards. I agree with you. I think he did look good. Elliott's out for another, I think, what did they say, 2-3 weeks? So that's probably going to help him a little bit as well. And, if he continues playing, reasonably well, he may find that it's then his spot to lose. So he's probably the guy. But look, the reality is it's unlikely we're going to get any rook that debuts from here that immediately their job security, we're going to be like, that's awesome. Like, by definition, they're not best 22 by virtue of the fact that they haven't debuted till, just about the middle of the year. So everyone coming in around about now is going to have job security issues. Again, the reality is that we need guys to downgrade to raise cash. And so you just got to kind of have to take some sort of leap of faith on some of these guys and back your eye in and your judgment about who's probably got the best chance of staying in the side, even if it's only for 4, 5, 6 weeks to keep that cash gen going. Because look, the reality is we've got Thomas, who's now stalled and going backwards. We've got Cadman, who's stalled and about to go backwards. Jai Clark he had an okay score, so he's not too bad. But our benches are starting to get a little bit thin. So Will Graham's been dropped. Zach Reed's coming back, soon. And so, but look, with his injury history, he's going to be hard to trust as well. But again, we're going to have to jump on some of these guys and hope they stay in the side. Otherwise, we won't be able to make sort of those upgrades that we need to do during the buys and certainly afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Jordox, is Richards your pick as well of the rookies?
Oh, I was a bit nervous about Richards, but I didn't watch the game, so I can't really comment too much. I looked at his numbers. I was impressed by his tackles.
Could have easily had 3 or 4 goals in the first half.
Yeah. I guess just the fact that they were playing the Eagles and they all got involved. But
what about your boy Finlay McRae as well? That's another one we probably didn't mention. Yeah, I've seen on Twitter you've been wanting him, and I think a lot of Collingwood fans have wanted him to play more. And he finally played. He kicked 3 goals. Pretty good.
I may have drafted him in a keeper at the start of the year, so there's probably a little bit of that coming in. No, well, he just didn't get the role. He kicked 3 goals. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, he's 295. I think he's an option, but I'm just nervous. He's I feel like he could be a whipping boy when the others come back. The ones I like to look for, for the cheapest ones are the ones who just played as a sub, came on, made an impression, and then they're in the 22 because they're still just a touch over 200K. I thought Shadow Brain is such a cool name for the Lions. He came on late in that game, and I thought he looked really good for Brisbane. So just keep an eye. I don't know when they're playing, and when you'll see their benches. But if he's not on the bench and he's named on field, maybe one to look at. Freya played really well for the Doggies, but again, they really feasted on the Tigers. So it is hard to get a bit of a read.
He's probably a good one. He's a good one to watch this week, I think, and see how he goes. And he's not going to be expensive, even if he does go all right. So he probably launch next week.
That's right. And Caleb Graham won't be back this week. I read that was confirmed. He'll have another spell. And Bruce Revel, Brucey boy, he looked good again. Another 50. So mid forward, I don't mind him.
Yeah. No, it's to be interesting with the Phillies. I was hoping Dan Curtin would be an option, but only 8 points and got subbed out. And unfortunately, that's why you don't do subs at half time because it can come back to bite. But then again, we shouldn't have subs and we should just be 5 on the bench. We could do a whole podcast on that. But also, we'll get to some questions here as well. If you guys are tuning in live, make sure you send your questions through to us on the live chats on either YouTube or Twitter. And if you are listening back to the podcast as well, then how about you join us on a Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Western Standard Time, and get involved in the fun and get your questions answered live by us and then our special guests that are on with us each week. So first one, we'll go to one-man band Vams. Is Fisher a must-get? Looks like a potential top 6 forward. So obviously we didn't talk about him with the whole McKercher potentially being out, and what if Sheezel comes back? Does that positively impact or negatively impact Fisher with having less kick-ins and market share and everything? So what are your thoughts on Fisher as a guy? Are you happy to bring him in with a couple of tough matchups, or is he a guy you'd rather look at for a couple of weeks and then maybe target post-buy?
No, I think he's definitely option for the forward lines. I've unfortunately traded him out a few weeks ago, and I was actually contemplating a Powell trade, which I guess maybe even it looks like it's a sideways trade, doesn't it? But a Powell trade to Fisher, actually. Powell's role has clearly changed. Obviously, again, with a couple of tough matchups, he's dropping cash like nobody's business at the moment. So he's still at a relatively reasonable price that you can actually get him up to someone, if you want to move into the midfield, for instance, or if you're so inclined to get him up to a Zorko, you can actually kind of get there from someone like him, whereas from someone like Cadman, it's quite difficult. But, if you think that Powell's going at, let's call it roughly 70-ish in this sort of suboptimal role, I think Fish with no Sheezel there's more ball for Fisher. I don't have his kick-in numbers beside me. I don't know if he's taking kick-ins or not, but I think it's fair to say that he could absolutely go at 90 plus if he's the main guy back there, or if it's just him and McKercher. So absolutely, I think he's an option. And again, certainly for those teams that are struggling with regards to their team value, looking at these types, I think is perhaps a better option. Yes, it's a little bit more risky. Yes, it will require another trade down the track, probably. Maybe not, though. But I feel like they're the ones that are going to allow you to inverted commas, complete your team sooner. And by that, I mean getting your worst scorers off the bench. I'm not talking about getting all the best 8 midfielders or all the best 6 defenders, but in terms of getting those worst scorers off your field and then entering luxury trade season earlier than some other teams, where you can then trade someone like a Fisher to a Zorko or something like that later on. So I would probably prefer to trade someone like a Cadman or a Thomas to Fisher if I was going to do it, and then maybe move whether it's a Fife or a Wilson, to the mids, and maybe get a worse Rook off that way. I just generally prefer to upgrade my worst guys rather than leaving a poor bench intact, particularly with guys that are losing cash, and kind of making just that upgrade on field. So I think if you can do that, that would probably be my suggestion. But yeah, absolutely, I think Fisher's worth a look.
Yes. I got the kick-out numbers from last week. So obviously Gold Coast did have 18 behinds, but Fisher had 9 of the kick-ins, played on from all of them. McKercher 7, then Core and McDonald had 1 each. And then from the week before against St Kilda, they kicked 13 behind. So you had Fisher had 6, played on from 5, and then McKercher had 6, McKercher 5, and then Core and McDonald had 1 each as well. So it seems like it's 50-50 split. Might stay even if Sheezel goes back, but he's getting a fair share of those kick-ins as well, which is always nice and what we want to be seeing.
That's a huge bonus. So again, I'm looking at his numbers now as well. Getting 5 or 6 kick-ins, and he played on 5 of them against St Kilda. What's that? 15 points. That's huge. That's taking your score from 75 to 90, just like that. And then last week, 9. What's that? 27. 27 points from kick-ins. That
25% of his score, pretty much.
That's exactly that. That is a massive leg up. So, in a week forward line. And if McKercher's not there, I mean, I don't think they're going to be entrusting the kicking duties to Hardiman, and so you might see him get all of them.
Bailey Scott's the interesting one. I know they like him. They like him on the wing. I wonder if this McKercher news will actually bring him back a bit more. But just my 2 cents on Fisher is, he's another example of why trading out Sheezel, things change. North are just flipping things around. I mean, Fisher would be in probably most of our teams for those that started him if he wasn't the sub, and we got the heads up on the sub a couple of days early. So if that had happened an hour before the bounce, some would have just had to put him on the bench and they'd still have him. So it's a funny game sometimes. But I look at his year: 60, 80, 70, 80, 80, 60, and then he was the sub and he scored 34 in a quarter against the Crows. So really high points per minute, and then back-to-back 103s. I'll be looking at him again. That's for sure.
Or defender. I mean, into perspective, I brought in McKercher last week. Like, I traded him out, I can't remember, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I brought him back last week because I was like, no Sheezel there. It's going to be the McKercher and Fisher show. Like, as a non-Sheezel owner, it was disgusting watching the McKercher and Sheezel basically wax lyrical back and forth. Like, I was just like remote through the TV sort of stuff. And
thing of beauty.
And so like Sheezel out of there, I was like, okay, it's going to be McKercher and Fisher. And McKercher was priced at 58. He could go 90 plus without Sheezel there. So I brought him last week. So I'm probably have to look at, I don't know what I'm going to do now. But the point being is, if McKercher's no longer there, and again, what if the scenario of Sheezel doesn't go back into fence? I mean, like, there's going to be a lot of ball there for Fisher. Like, but I agree with Jordox. I think Bailey Scott is probably another candidate to maybe go back there and help out there, particularly with things like kick-ins. I mean, in round 1, he took the most kick-ins actually. So he's certainly been on the radar for being in that role previously.
Yeah.
And he finished the year like a house on fire, Bailey Scott, last year, post-buys. 708K. I'll be having a look this week.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see how North Melbourne. I think team sheets for North Melbourne are going to be a very, very close eye for a lot of people because they're bringing a couple of forwards. Yeah, Sheezel could be going back there, and it could be, very interesting. Detached Jets has got a question, another one involving Sheezel. So he's asking about these trades, Jordox. I know you've said you're not trading Sheezel, but he's going Sheezel to Tom Green and then Roberts to Oliver is what he's currently looking at. And he's thinking about Sheezel with Colby out. He said he doesn't know. It's very annoying because he wanted to do those above trades. But what do you think with those trades, bringing in Green and Oliver for Roberts and Sheezel?
Oh, look, if I can't talk you out of trading Sheezel and you're going to do it anyway, that's pretty delicious. Green and Oliver in. I think Sheezel's a hold. I thought he was a hold before the McKercher news, and I especially think he is now. But if you're committed to trading him, Green and Oliver, great trade-ins. I wouldn't be trading Sheezel.
Yeah. Vams, your thoughts on that one as well?
I think that generally the two approaches are to do a trade like that or trading a Thomas type Rook, or if Will Graham misses or something like that again, trading one of those bench Rooks down to a Richards type and then upgrading a Roberts. And again, even though I like the idea of the Sheezel thing, it's kind of a bit of a contrarian type of thing. It's pretty cool to do, but again, gun to my head, if I was a Sheezel owner, I'd probably hold him, and I would probably do that bench Rook downgrade and then get Roberts up to whoever you wanted. That's probably the way I would go. Again, we've got to keep in mind, and I'll quote Rids here, who coined the term, bench hygiene. And I think at this time of the year where we're all very, very focused on upgrades, it's very easy to do these type of shuffling the deck chairs type trades to make our starting side look a little bit better, neglect the bench, and come the buys, or certainly the back end of the buys and afterwards, your bench is looking like poor. Where are you going to get the cash from them? So I think that's why I'd probably lean more towards that second type of trade, which is downgrading a Thomas, downgrading a Will Graham if he's not named, or downgrading a Cadman, and then upgrading someone like a Roberts. That's probably the way I would lean.
Yeah. I'm just actually looking here at Selby's price projector, and again, I'll shout out obviously Selby. Make sure you guys, if you haven't got it, go and subscribe to Rose Magic on there, and you get all the great tools and the podcasts and everything, and it goes obviously to a great cause, whatever. Yeah, so I've got here. So if Sheezel goes 120 this week, he drops 34k. 110 drops 40. If he gets 100, he drops 48, and if he goes 90, he drops 55k, and his break even is still a 158, which is, it's very interesting. It makes that this is such a one where people are going to go one way or the other, and it could sort of benefit or not benefit you depending on what way.
To be honest, it does just come down to where you personally project, like what you project him to do. Like Jordox is clearly of the view that, look, there's every chance that he goes back into defense, in which case, if you have that view, then you don't trade him. If you have the view that, look, I think he's going to stay in this midfield forward role, then you ask yourself, what's he going to average? If you think he can average still 90 plus, maybe go, you know what? I'd rather not spend it. Yes, he's dropping in cash, but I'd rather not spend a trade on someone who's going to be a 90-ish defender for me anyway, which is perfectly fine. I'd rather upgrade around him. So you probably got to ask yourself those two questions. But if you do think he's going to be, if he's going to average 83 in a mid-forward role, then sure. Then I do think it's probably worthwhile trading him sort of in that scenario. So again, you've got to sort of ask yourself those questions first and then come to the decision about whether you want to trade or not.
Well, one thing I'd throw you boys, obviously, is that we've talked about like a Green and that. What if you didn't have a Nick Dacos and you could go a Sheezel down to Nick Dacos, and then you've got enough cash on that end to go like a Roberts to an Oliver? Obviously, you'd need roughly 80 to 100k in the bank already, so some coaches might not be able to do that. But then also the other option I'll throw out is the one that I'm looking at doing still this week is Luke Ryan, who's got St Kilda this week, he got a 160 against them last year, and he's averaging well over 107 against him in his career, and we know what St Kilda give up to defenders. Then he's got Collingwood at Optus, which is two great matchups back to back. Could you make a play going to a Dacos or an Oliver, jumping off Sheezel, knowing even if he goes half back, two tough matchups, he might go back to back hundreds or less. He's probably not going to go over 120 in these tough matchups. Obviously, you can never say never with a guy like Sheezel. and then do another move on the other end. What are our thoughts on that and playing like the break-even game, maybe jumping back on Sheezel at like 900K post his buy?
Yeah, I mean, you've articulated the plan well, and there's plenty of merit in it. But again, I look at my team, and I'm not looking at sidewaysing primos because they've had a role change. I'm looking at how do I get kids off my field. Yeah, no, I don't know, mate. Ask Vams. Like I said, I'm not trading shit.
I mean, obviously, we've probably spent 80% of this pod so far talking about Sheezel.
Yeah,
but look, it is a big decision. To be fair, it is a big decision, and I think what the listeners have probably gotten out of this, which is that again, it just comes down to what your personal view of what Sheezel's role is going to be, and then what he's going to score in that role. And I think, even though I've said I'd probably lean more towards keeping him, I'm probably more of the view of he's probably going to stay in a mid-forward role, in which case I'm a little bit more bearish on his scoring. Jordox has more of a look, North Melbourne are moving things around, and there's every chance he goes back into defence, and I don't want to be stuck with my sort of, pants around my ankles if I trade him out and he's moved back in defence, and that's a perfectly sort of logical scenario to occur as well. Coming back to your sort of scenario of which, like, a Sheezel to Ryan, like, yeah, absolutely, it's doable. But again, it depends on what you think Sheezel's going to do. It would not shock me in the slightest, honestly, if Luke Ryan outscores Sheezel by 100 points over the next 2 weeks. It would not shock me in the slightest. There's every chance Sheezel goes 75 this week and Luke Ryan does a 143, and next week it's 80 versus 129. Like, that would not shock me at all. And if that happens, awesome. Like that, yeah, it's a great trade. But if Jordox's sort of projection occurs of, look, Sheezel goes back into defence, and to be honest, he's kind of like Nick Martin. I remember Nick Martin. He's another guy I did not start with, and he had a bad matchup. He was coming up against Port Adelaide. I was like, finally, some reprieve for me. And I can't remember exactly what he did, but he still did like 115 or something. I'm trying to look it up here, but like, he finally had this like tough matchup. And let me have a look what he scored against Port Adelaide, 114. And he's the type of player, like, they're just that hungry and they get fed the ball that much that the matchup may not matter for someone like him in that half-back role. And so, again, if he goes back to defence to cover McKercher being out for the next 2 weeks into his bye, it probably doesn't matter who he's going to play. He's probably still going to go at 110 to 120. And so I'll be able to answer your question in 2 weeks' time. How's that?
Yeah, no, we'll revisit this in a couple of weeks as well, I'm sure. We've got a couple of super chats here, so thank you very much to these boys. Hansa360 got the first one. Please discuss James Peatling with the Josh Kelly news. So if anyone missed that, calf injury for Josh Kelly, reported that he's going to miss about 6 weeks, which is quite a long time. So he must have badly done the calf. I've done a calf once and I missed about 3 weeks, but I don't think I did it too bad. Whereas, yeah, that must have been pretty bad. So Vams, what are your thoughts on a James Peatling with he's still got a negative 11 break even after that big score, and if obviously got to come back into the side first, but if he does, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, what's he priced at now?
He's in the low 400s.
Low 400s. So, look, I guess he's an option. The question is, like, who would you be trading him to? What was the question posed? It was
I just discussed Peatling. It wasn't about trading. It was just about discussing him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's an option. I mean, ideally, if you're bringing in someone like him, you're raising cash, and so
maybe.
Who's that? Sorry.
Maybe a read down to him if people.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, what's Reed now? Is he 580, something like that? So
yeah, 530.
And then you ask yourself, so if you did Reed down to Peatling, who can you get a Roberts up to? And I guess that's kind of the way I'd be thinking about it. It's like Peatling, I'm sure he's going to, certainly if he gets named, and I think some of his best games have been when they have had some midfielders out. I think he got a big bump in CBAs when Tom Green got injured. I think it was him. No, I think it was either when him or Cogs was out. I can't recall, but so I think if he gets the role, and obviously if he's named, yeah, he could score well. But it just would come down to if bringing him in, who can I then afford to get a Roberts type up to? Like, who can I like? What sort of upgrade can I make on the other end? Like someone like a Reed to Peatling, and then like a Roberts to Oliver. Yeah, okay. That's not the worst trade in the world. I don't know. I'd probably rather find a cheaper Rook. But look, that's not the worst trade. Like even getting. I'm just trying to have a look here at who else we've got on our bench, but
well, the other rookie actually to look at in this scenario as well is a Josh Fahey, who's been tearing up the VFL as well. He could potentially come in with Ash also out, so a guy that can play wing / half back, cheap rookie we could look at.
What's he priced at?
I don't know. He hasn't played yet. I think he'd be either 200 or 230 or something. I know he's under 250. I think
he's right down the bottom.
Is he?
Yeah, Josh Fahey, 277.
Okay.
So
and how long do we know how long Lockie Ash is out for?
I think both
6
are 6 weeks. Yeah,
6 weeks. Wow. Okay. Well, I think this is the thing, and one thing I've noticed DT Lemon did on at least 2 and maybe even 3 occasions this year was when he saw a cheap guy get named, and if he was bullish on that guy, and from memory, Closey was one of these guys, i.e. someone that had huge scoring pedigree, has been tearing up the twos. All they need is an opportunity. Like sometimes it's like a good idea just to jump straight on, because if Fahey gets named this week and does an 80, for instance, which is absolutely we know he's capable of doing, obviously if he's not sub, etc. Like everyone's going to want to jump on him next week, and you're that one sort of trade ahead, so to speak, in inverted commas. So. Like he's someone absolutely, I think if he gets named, I'd probably be more likely to want to jump on someone like that than a Peatling.
Yeah. I like the Peatling move. I like it because 7 days ago we were talking about it and then they omitted him, which was probably the most baffling omission I've seen this season. He was fantastic in that derby against the Swans. But if you look at his scoring, I mean, round 6, he was a sub and he scored 38 off 22% time on ground. Mm-hmm. Then he follows it up with an 81, just 72% time on ground. And then obviously Tom Green went down and his CBAs went up and he had that big 115 against the Swans. Now, I've seen a few people saying, the Josh Kelly out shouldn't really help him all that much in terms of CBAs because Josh Kelly's not really a big CBA guy at the minute. Well, he wasn't on the weekend anyway. But it helps Peatling because it gives him a spot in the 23 because he was in 2s last week. So I think if Peatling comes in with that break even, he's been in the CBAs in dribs and drabs for most of the season and his scoring points per minute is really good. So I think that's a definite option. Depending what you're doing with it. If you're expecting him to go on and be a guy you have on your field post buys, probably not. But with that break even, he should be able to make you some money at the very least.
And just before I made the comment that look, because I'm looking now, he's 444k, and I was like, well, who can you really trade down to him to sort of facilitate an upgrade on the other end? And maybe, again, depending on how bearish you are, maybe that guy might be Tom Powell. Like, Tom Powell is 680k with a break-even 105, and he's going at basically 60, granted in large part due to one stinker.
Every other game for Powell's been over 70, actually, besides that 30.
It's true. But to Jordox's point, Peatling 81 and 115 last 2 games when he's had a fair crack at it. Again, maybe a little bit too sideways, but that would raise 240k. That then gets
that's chunky. I mean, we've got the guys. It depends what your cash is, right? Like if you're carrying over a bit of cash, Roberts down to Peatling, that's 156k on top of whatever's in your bank. If you've been stashing cash in the last few weeks, you'd be able to do something pretty good with that. So, he's an option.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, no, definitely something to consider. Corey Bladge got nothing on the super chat here as well, so thank you very much for that, mate. He said, Jordox, thoughts on Cherry and Roberts to Dawson and Oliver this week. Had 418k in the bank and can trade Graham and Campbell next week for a forward. And he's got Sweet. So this is that the people that had Sweet at R3, they could go Cherry out, put Sweet at R2, put those funds. Essentially, what people did the week before Sweet was out when he got the 88, getting a Dawson in the midfield, and then going a Roberts to Oliver. What do you think about that? Because I'm a big fan of that play actually.
Well, it's interesting that the Cherry score. I mean, him and Grundy have been sort of neck and neck all year. I mean, Cherry's probably edged him, certainly with a couple of 120s recently. But I think we've all been kind of waiting for which one is the one that you'll move on. And obviously, Cherry scoring a 50-odd last week, albeit up in Darwin, means he's a guy that can go. No, I love that, Corey, because, you and everyone else that jumped on the Sweet at R2 were just so desperately unlucky last week.
Or if you like me, Mini Munkin jumped over to bloody Todd Goldstein, 35-year-old. That ended up being a 1 week play that actually worked okay.
Well, that Draper's gone for surgery.
He'll make cash.
Yeah, that could be a longer play.
We'll make cash.
I'll give Mini Monk the credit. Mini Monk was the first one that went for it, so I'll give him more credit.
Back to Corey's question. Dawson and Oliver come in. Sweet goes to R2. I think you've thought it out pretty well, mate. That's a good play.
Yeah, I like it as well. And well, just quick, obviously, Joyce been the Crows man. Thoughts on Dawson? Only 53% CBAs, but didn't matter last week. He nearly got the Crows over the line in that last quarter. Went very well, and he's got a very good run of 4 games. I think he's got Collingwood, Richmond, West Coast, and Hawthorn. I don't know the exact order. It might be Collingwood, West Coast, Hawthorn, Richmond, I think, is the order. Right. 4 great matchups.
Yeah, boy, absolutely loved Collingwood at the G last year, if anyone remembers.
Yeah.
And if the umpire had loved him too, maybe we'd get the points. It's enough Bails. Calm down. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Dawson last week, and I kind of expanded on Laird and my trepidation with those two, just with what the Crows are doing with the midfield. And, obviously we've seen Soligo pop up and Rankin and Rochelle are coming through there. And they're moving Dawson around the ground. He's a bit of a Mr. Fix-It. The good thing, if you own Dawson or you're looking to get him in this week, is he's showing that he can score in any position on the ground. He is just such a dead set champion player that even if he does spend time forward, he impacts and he takes those big marks. He's got maybe the best hands I've seen. Oh, look, I'm getting a bit biased here. But for a midfielder, his hands are so good in the marking.
I tend to agree as well, but I'm a bit biased as well, so I can't really say. Vams, has he got good head? Good. Is he good? One of the best markers as a midfielder?
Well, coming back to this, I'll make one comment with regards to Corey's trades. Just keep an eye. Just have a look at when Soldo may be due back. From memory, I think Port Adelaide quoted 5 weeks. This would be coming up to what would it be? Week 2, week 3, maybe. I
think he was 2 to 3 on.
I've got there. He's 2 to 3 on the injury report, but and if he's back in 2 weeks, the struggle that I've got with that is that 2 weeks puts him at a Thursday night game against Carlton, then they got their bye. So I think that he's just going to be post bye.
So that's the only. So I like the trade that he's talking about. Whether we can quibble over Dawson versus Merritt versus Dunk, that's eye of the beholder stuff. But in terms of relying on Sweet at R2, I think it's a very aggressive move. I think it comes down to a judgment call about whether you think Sweet can actually surpass Soldo on the depth chart and keep the number 1 ruck role even when Soldo comes back. And after watching, I traded Cherry to Sweet a couple of weeks ago as well. And after seeing what Sweet did against, was it the Crows?
Riley O'Brien,
Yeah, that's a tough matchup. And he put up nearly 90 or something like that. I got real bullish and I was like, okay, he's on here. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see him last week as well. And it's really annoying, not just because we didn't get the score from him and the subsequent price rise, but it was
a long game.
Well, exactly. Like it was a game where he could have potentially
Stanley
dominated,
subbed
and
out
again
as well.
tried to and plant his flag as the number one ruck there. And so, look, he's still got potentially another couple of weeks to do that. But the only thing that I would just ask Corey to consider is what are your plans if Solder comes back in? Let's call it 2 weeks and walk straight back into the first team. Do you have a contingency to then get another ruck in? Or does that completely bugger up your other sort of plans or upgrade cadence? If, on the other hand, you think, look, sweet, you love the look of him, you think he's better than Soldo, you think he's going to stay in the side, then, yeah, absolutely, I'd do that sort of trade.
Yeah. We've got another super chat here from Zitters21. He said, hey, Bails, enjoy the content every week. Thanks, mate. Very much appreciated. I'll go to you for Vans for this one. Is Ollie Wines an option before his buy? Rosie out, low break even, good run, last 3 average of 117. I know you tweeted early in the week and said about sort of almost like the vindication in a way of these starting picks because you had obviously Wines is now going very well for us. What are your thoughts about? Could you bring him back in? I know Kara brought him back in last week and was very, very happy with this score. So could you bring him back in?
Oh, look, I'm very. I started with Wines, and he's one I traded out after round 1, so I'm so annoyed about that. But look, yeah, you could. I think the thing with him has always been like my worry with him is just that when all of Butters, Horn Francis, Drew, and Rosie are playing, Wines has not got the role that we would be hoping for. I don't think he's been getting the ball. He's been very deferential. A lot of, handballs to some of these zippier players. And so, we haven't seen Rosie sort of fit and firing for at least a couple of weeks, which has coincided with Wines, getting some of these great fantasy scores. I'd be more inclined to sort of endorse that sort of move if Wines was 690k instead of 822k. He's currently priced at 95. So, even if you think that with all those midfielders playing, even if you think that he can go at around 100, he's still not value at his current price. So, overall, I'd probably say pass. I think Oliver at, what is it, maybe 100k cheaper, I don't know exactly, is probably I would say Oliver's going to at least match or go similar to doing what Wines might do with all the Port guys back.
Brings the same price as well.
And then and you save yourself a little bit of coin there. So that's probably what I'd do. And unfortunately, we probably missed the boat on Wines.
Yeah, no, I agree. Chris actually said this comment relating to McKercher before, saying if you wanted to hold him, you've got Blake Howes against the West Coast this week, so that could be solid cover as well. So we'll go about rapid fire for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. So we'll go to the first one, which is from Leon Ridley. So he said Dunkley or Zorko, Jordox. Who are you going out of those two, or should he go and save the cash and go for Clary?
There's an extra layer to that question now. If it was just Dunkley v Zorko, I'd be going Dunkley. And this week, if you can, because who have they got? They've got someone. Richmond there,
then Hawthorn, then the bye, then Bulldogs, and St Kilda. Great run.
I'd be going Dunks. Or Oliver. Look, it depends what you do with that cash. So if you're doing Oliver instead of the Dunkley move, you're pocketing 164k. So I guess it depends on the value of what you're doing with that cash. But certainly out of the three of them, I'd be getting Dunkley in.
Yeah. Corey Butledge said, still remember Green going 170 against the Dogs last year, who he's got this week. So, yep, that's a good point as well. Could easily blow that break in out of the water if he does something like that. What have we got here? Olive Bartel said his trades Vams. He's going Lazaro or Graham, one of the two, down to Sullivan and going Fife up to Fisher. What are your thoughts on those?
Oh, I don't mind it. As I said, I'm bullish on Fisher. I don't know. I feel like Fife, he's a funny one because he's risky because he could be sub. They could rest him. he does have these, kind of suboptimal games as well. But on the other hand, it's bloody Nat 5. And so, like, I feel like it's like a low priority trade out as well. So even though I think Fisher has, every chance at out averaging 5, I mean, I'm looking at 5 scores now. Yeah. I mean, he's been very up and down, hasn't he? Apart, like, he's had that fantastic game against the Western Bulldogs. Other than that, it's a whole bunch of 60s, really. So, you know what? That's actually 5 has not been quite as good as what I was, for some reason, I had perceived. So
I'd be doing it.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
And the reason why, just quickly, is what we've just seen with Elliot Yeo. I mean, sometimes it gets to a point with these guys, you get out. I mean, anyone that started Yeo, started Fife, to think that they would play every game and you would have them all year, I think now would be a fine time. And Fisher's a perfect guy because he's a similar price, and we're sort of forecasting a bit of an uptick for him.
What are your thoughts, Jordox? I'll bring this as well. Alex Sexton.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me.
Could he potentially be back as well? Obviously, we talked about Fisher.
He's frozen.
Jordox is frozen with his arms up in the air. If we watch that on camera, that'd be favourite. Vans, what do you
having a tonic seizure of excitement by the looks of things. But
thoughts on Sexton?
Can you hear us, Jordox? Sign of proof of life, please. Are you okay? No, he's frozen.
Well, I'll do
that. We know that here he comes. We know that in this sort of half-back role, he can score. And I think obviously Will Power's been suspended for a number of games. So, I think Hardwick came out and said that they were very happy with him going back and working on a couple of things, and now he's back and obviously played a good game. So, yeah, I think he's an option. Probably not my favourite option. I feel like they're still shuffling stuff around as well up there at Gold Coast. So, but is he cheap? Yes. Could he absolutely outscore? I mean, he's priced at 58. Could he go at, let's call it 80 to 85? Yeah, absolutely you can. So I'd probably around sort of a similar price point. No, they're a little bit more expensive. I'd probably go a Peatling over him. He's 50, 60K cheaper. He's scoring maybe, if he's not sub, of course, he's scoring maybe a little bit more upside in the right role. I'd probably lean more towards that. I mean, the forwards are also, here he comes. The forwards also a little bit, we're also wanting a little bit in the forward line, whereas in defence, we've got lots and lots of options. So I'd probably lean more that. I was just saying, Jordox, I'd probably lean more towards a Peatling who's about 440K than a Sexton who's about 500K. If I was looking for someone around that price point.
Ask me again, Bails.
What's on sexy back? And don't do your hands up in the air because that might set it off again.
No, my Wi-Fi just died. So last week I had a really good round, but my one regret was that I didn't trust my gut, and I traded Dylan Moore in, and I wanted to trade in Sexton. So based on that, I think he's an absolute guy to go for this week, and I'm looking at him because pre-season the role was there. A lot of us started with him. He had a couple of patchy games, and then they dropped him. He went to the twos in that halfback role, killed it in terms of numbers and performance, came back in and played in Darwin, where it's a bit sloppy and wet, and scored an 88. I think he's a goer.
Yeah. I think he could potentially be an option that you could consider. The Colonel 96 has got this one. Jordox, Green, Sarong, or Luke Ryan. Who are you picking out of those? Obviously, different price points. Ryan obviously being a defender. Who are you picking out of those guys?
It's a tricky one because you're throwing a defender in there at the third one.
Well, go Green or Sarong first. We'll go through that.
Yeah, well, I think Sarong. I think Sarong at the minute. I think he's. I think it's a better pick. And then little flag
I'll just throw with him is that the first time Sarong was actually properly tagged in a game was against St Kilda last year, and he got kept, I think, was an 80 odd against the Saints. So that's just a flag that Ross could do that again. But I still love Sarong as an option. Got the good buy as well. But so Sarong or Luke Ryan?
I would go. Oh, I'd go Sarong. I'd go Sarong. I mean, I like Ryan, and I love his ceiling and the role, and the next few weeks look good. But if he scored a 60 in the coming weeks, I just wouldn't even think twice about it. So, yeah, that's where I'd land on Sarong.
I think I'd go Sarong there as well. Tony Ford, just short of getting Butters, Vams. How is Luke Ryan for a trade in for Roberts? So if you can't quite get to Butters, what are your thoughts on getting in a Luke Ryan instead?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always seduced by upside, and so I'm high on Luke Ryan over the next couple of weeks. I think it's look. We know that this these defenders against St Kilda and Collingwood for that matter, they score very well, right? But when you get a situation where both the team that they're playing against gives up a lot of points to a certain position, and the team that's playing them plays a certain style that likes to rack up a lot of points in that very same position, that's kind of like this Goldilocks scenario where a certain, a player, and it may not be Luke Ryan, right? But that's the
Jordan
sort
Clark
of scenario
might break
where,
100.
yeah, well, that's the sort of thing where he can go a 160. The counter argument is that bringing in a player purely because you are banking on a ceiling score happening in the next 1 to 2 weeks, it can really hurt when it doesn't happen. And I'll give you an example is Tom Stewart to start this year. One of the reasons Tom Stewart was very popular to start the year, not the only reason, but one of the reasons was that he had a dream, sort of what we thought was a dream start or sort of series of matchups to start the year. And that included, off the top of my head, I think it may have included St Kilda in round 1. Let me have a look here. Yes, it did. Right. So a lot of people brought in Tom Stewart, starting pick. He's got St Kilda round 1. He's going to get me off to a flyer. And what happened? Tom Stewart, he didn't have a disaster game, but 85. Right. And so the problem is that if the ceiling score, and they don't happen often, even in these matchups where you think are great matchups, they don't always happen. So the problem is if they don't happen, are you going to be happy having Luke Ryan anyway? And I would say yes. So I would be leaning more towards Luke Ryan in that scenario, purely also because of the big difference in price. He's probably, again, I think he's probably about 100K cheaper than Sarong. I think he's shown now that he's probably going to be a top 6 defender. So worst case scenario, even if that 140, 130 plus score doesn't happen, he's probably going to be reasonably safe in terms of just having, he's not going to be value or anything, but you're probably bringing in a defender who's going to be close to top of their line or top 6 of their line, and that's not going to be a disaster. Whereas, but you could also say the same thing about Sarong. I mean, they're both fantastic options. I would probably at this point of the season go for the cheaper guy just because, again, we've got a certain budget over the next, let's call it 5 to 6 weeks. Different teams will have a different budget to sort of spend. And I was chatting to someone else today, and I used the analogy of when people are asking, should I bring in a Tom Green or a Sarong, for instance, the question that we just posed. I mean, there's such different price points. It's like asking me to create a household budget for someone where I don't know what their income is. And so it's very, very much team dependent on what you think your team can afford to do over the next 5-6 weeks. And if you can bring in a 950K player every week for the next 6 weeks because your team value is that good, awesome, go for it, get the best guy. But I don't think there's going to be that many teams that are going to be able to do that. And so I think you're probably better off going for a Tom Green type, an Oliver type, and leave yourself a little bit of leeway to then maybe get that extra poor score off your field a little bit sooner than everyone else.
Yeah. Very good thoughts there, Vams. We'll go 2 more questions and then we'll cut it because we've been going for nearly an hour and 10 minutes. So we'll go these ones here. So Jordox. So Tom asked about Petrarca and Angus asked about Bont. So your quick thoughts on those 2 guys.
Really quick, without looking at anything, Petrarca, no. if it's looking like the forward status is coming, but it sounds like it's probably not going to be for the next one.
Essentially, got to do what he did last week, but for the next 2 weeks for it to happen. I think.
No, I wouldn't. He kicked 5 goals. It was one of the games of the year, individual performances of the year. He got a 130. Bont. Yeah, you could with Bont. He could come home as number 1 player in the back half. So you could just be prepared for some frustrations.
Yeah, no, his tackling looked back a bit more on the weekend as well. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. And the final question, I'll go to Vans for this one. It hasn't actually been asked anyone in the chat, but I know a few people probably are looking at this week if they're going up in the rucks. Marshall or English? We had this discussion in the preseason when we did the head-to-head video of Marshall versus English. Who are you going now?
I brought in English after round 0 or round 1. I can't remember when Grundy put up that garbage score. And English proceeded to have a couple of very disappointing, a few disappointing weeks. And Sam Darcy was actually giving a little bit more of a chop out in the ruck than what I was hoping for. But as of late, English looks to have sort of regained reasonably bulk ruck contest status. Looking at his numbers now, the last game it was a little bit down, but prior to that, in 4 of the prior 5 weeks, he was sort of above 75%, which we want him to be around that 75 to 80% mark. Whereas in round 2 and 3, he got 61 and 64% of ruck time, which is, look, it's enough for his scores to bump down from 120 to that 105, 110 range, or maybe even less. So now that he looks back, he does look very good. But Marshall is, I don't know. I feel like Marshall is probably I think he's going to outscore English this year. The only caveat I would say is with this, what was it, that knee injury? But I tell you what, after a lot of people traded out Marshall to sweep the week prior, due to fears for that
it was a red herring. That injury.
Yeah, it was. And hey, I was a proponent of it. I think I tweeted about it and I said it's a reasonable play. And the reason I thought it was a reasonable play because I thought there was a scenario where St Kilda against whoever was it North Melbourne or West Coast? I can't remember exactly, but I was like, St Kilda could be up so much, and Ross the boss may just sub Marshall in Q3 or Q4, and it happened last year. But boy, he came out and played an absolute blinder. He looked good. So I think it's fair to say that the knee thing is probably not a concern. And if it's not, I would probably lean more towards Marshall. But honestly, flip a coin. I don't have strong conviction either way.
Yeah, I think that is the case.
To split it just quickly, I'd go Marshall over English, and to split it, I would say who's got the better backup than the Dogs do. So that's how I'd split it.
Yep. That's a good point. Yep. And well, Ben here, we'll finish off on this comment because we're talking about trading Ryan Marshall. He said, "Time to delete my team, getting back Colby last week and trading Ryan Marshall." So, yeah, just
thoughts and prayers, Benny. Thoughts and prayers.
It's hard to come back from that. It really is.
Well, it's a long season.
Yeah, and Vams, I know you tweeted out about because JD was saying it before how he's traded a few players that were good trade-ins, and he's obviously a very good coach, as you said, and just it comes down to it's just unfortunately you just have some rotten luck over a few weeks, which I know even Mini Monk in a way as well. He traded that run last week. He's had a few weeks as well where just things have just not worked. So luck is a factor as well, but skill is also a little bit. But yeah,
just look
forward. If there's logic to these moves, the key is that you've got to consider what all the possible outcomes are going to be, and then you make a judgment call. And sometimes you might think that, I think there's only a 20 to 30% chance Marshall gets subbed, right? But if that happens, I'm way ahead and I'm prepared to take that risk. And if it doesn't happen, I'll live with the consequences, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that because he didn't get subbed and he put out a 130, it was a bad decision. It was you made a call and you were hoping for it to go one way and it went the other way and it sent you back. And again, that's the game we play, right? But the reality is if you want to finish in the top 100 out of 100,000 people, you're going to need some of those calls to go your way. So it's okay to sort of to roll the dice a little bit on occasion.
And keep making those calls because they're the calls that get you there.
Selby's ending quote on all of his trade insights is back your gut and you'll be rewarded. And I think that you just got to keep backing your gut if you're backing your, as you said, Jordox, last week. Look, as you said, you went with gut was saying Sexton, you went more. It was only 17 points, so it wasn't bad. But as you said, if you went your gut.
But the cash.
So,
the cash.
Yeah, the cash. Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, we'll wrap it up there. It's been a long one, but it's been a good one. Plenty of good strategy and stuff talked as well, and answering a few questions. But Vams, just quickly as well, what are your trades looking like this week, if you'd like to share? Or what are you looking at if you don't want to share your exact trades?
Well, I was looking at a Thomas down to Richards and then a Roberts up to Green. But the McKercher, I'm going to have to digest this McKercher news, and I think it's probably going to come down to whether I think he's only going to miss 1 week or more. Hopefully, we get a little bit more news over the next couple of days. If he's only going to miss 1 week, I'm probably going to have to stick with my plan to hold him and upgrade around him. I do think if he's fit, he can score well. So that was what I was going to do. But again, I'm going to have to reassess and maybe. If I'm going to trade McKercher, I might have to look at guys like Fisher and look at some other trades. Play it by ear. Wait till the team news comes out as per usual, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Jordox, what are you looking at?
Tuesday is very early for me to know, but I've got a couple of things. I think what I looked at today was a Roberts and McKercher to a Kid and Zorko. I feel like Zorko, I know it's not value. I know the price isn't right. It's screaming Aaron Hall vibes of a couple of years ago. And I waited all year to get Hall because I kept saying he can't keep doing it. So I reckon I'll try and get Zork in this week. But I just remembered Sexton and how can I do that instead? So we'll see. It'll either be a smart move to get Zorko or a stupid one to try and find a way to get Sexy Boy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still currently looking at trading Harry Sheezel at this moment in time and going down to Luke Ryan, which gives me enough cash to go Roberts up to Oliver. That's what I'm currently looking at. But there is a chance that I keep Sheezel and just do like a Cadman down to a Richard. So that's what I'm currently looking at. But boys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for jumping on. Obviously, Tim couldn't quite make it tonight, but that is okay. We'll obviously hear his thoughts on Friday afternoon on the pre-lockout chat. But Vams, mate, thank you very much for coming on and joining us. Where can the people find you across the socials? Yeah,
just come and find me on Twitter. You can find me at fantasynut_AFL. Occasionally post on there, so come and have a chat.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, thank you very much, mate. Jordox, thank you for jumping on once again. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, I'm on X at Jordox 2020, and like Vams, I post things from time to time and love having a discussion. So come find me and let's see how we go this weekend.
Beautiful. And you find me at Bails DT across socials, and you can obviously find Tim at Tim Guest AU on the socials as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for those people that tuned in live as well and sent through their questions. And thank you also to Henza360, Corey, and Zitters21 for their super chats. Very much appreciated. If you are listening to the podcast on replay, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. That'll be very much appreciated. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can hit 3,000 subscribers and leave a like on the video. And also, we've got a new Facebook group as well, AFL Fantasy Fanatics. So make sure you go and ask to join in the group. And there's a couple of questions for you to answer, but they're not too difficult. So just saying like favourite player and team to support. So make sure you jump in and keep up to date with all of the AFL Fantasy Fanatics content over on Facebook as well. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. And we'll catch you guys on Friday for the pre-lockout chat at 6 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Western Standard Time. So we'll catch you guys then. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you then. We're out.
Good luck, guys. Thank you.
See you guys.